Hello, hi, welcome. My name is Danielle. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're talking about the 10 tips for traveling in 2021. So we're actually going to start with our tips. Tip number one is actually know where you're going. And hear me out, I know this sounds simple, but actually it's meant to be very simple. Knowing where you're going right now is actually very crucial because if you're traveling internationally, that could be a little tricky if the location you're going to is closed. So just doing a little research beforehand, knowing which places are open, which are not, saves you a lot of time and is very helpful later. As well as that, when going to your travel destination, looking beforehand, knowing where you're going is a big help because a lot of small businesses in the last year and a half have ended up having to temporarily close or permanently close. I know personally I've had a lot of places recommended to me and I wasn't able to go to them because when I went searching for them, they had they'd been notifying that they were actually closed. So knowing beforehand takes some of that stress away during your trip if you're looking last minute where you need to go. Right, tip number two, entry and exit requirements. So as I was mentioning before, entry and exit requirements are very important because if for example you're taking a plane to your location, you have to fulfill those entry requirements before getting on the plane. And I have found an amazing website while researching. It's actually by Kayak, where they list all the requirements for entry into different international countries. And we're going to put that on the screen right now. So I pulled out my laptop and I have it ready.
All right, so this is the International Travel Restriction by Country website. And first, I wanted to say the two reasons I love this website. First of all, it's updated very frequently. And the second reason is because this is a resource that can be used for unplanned trips or trips that don't have a destination yet, which is why I think it's a fantastic resource. A little disclaimer though, I still would do extra research based on the country that you're traveling to because this website might not have it 100% correct. So I am going to give a little brief overview on how to use the website and then move on to the rest of the tips. So right here, the select origin to view restrictions, where you would choose the country that you're leaving from. Just to show you how it works, I chose the United States, and on the map, the United States here has been grayed out, and as you move your cursor, you notice that the website tells you what country that is. And I'm also going to explain the color system that this website has outlined the map by, which is in 3 different colors. The green is the completely open countries, which means that their borders have no entry requirements and has no restrictions for most countries. The orange, which is actually most of the world, it's open with restrictions. And open with restrictions means that the country has a requirement in order to enter. And the red means that the country's completely closed, the borders are closed, and that in order to enter, you would have to fall under one of the exemption rules. So you can move the map by going around and seeing the different countries. And as you can see, only 4 are in the green, which are completely open. 156 are countries that are open with restrictions, and 65 are closed. So if you keep going down, your selected country is still there. Mine is still the United States, and you can filter through region here, as well as you can select different things that you would like to filter your list by, and this works very well if you don't know where you're traveling to. So if you want a country with open borders, that would filter out all the closed ones. And also if you take out countries that don't require a quarantine period or COVID testing, it'll filter those out. As you can see, the list is alphabetical. It's not by region unless you select that, and it keeps going down that way. And on the top of this, it will say the status of the country, whether it be open, closed, or open with restriction. So just to demonstrate how this would work, I'm just going to select Europe because I know a lot of people that are actually going there right now, and it's a popular travel place at the moment. So I'm going to just go down here and select the United Kingdom. And it just gives you different stats of the United Kingdom, as well as what happens if you're unvaccinated, as opposed to being vaccinated, and the requirements that you have to meet in order to enter, because this is one of the countries that's open with restrictions. So for unvaccinated visitors, you would have to provide a negative COVID-19 test and be required to quarantine for a certain amount of time, while vaccinated visitors would just have to present a negative COVID-19 test. So if you go down here to the testing requirements, it tells you which tests that they require and with what time period that they would need it. In accordance to the United Kingdom, they require a negative PCR test or antigen test, and it has to be taken within 72 hours before departing. So down here in this return travel section, this would be what I was talking about, the exit requirements. So if you're returning back to the United Kingdom from wherever you're traveling from, these would be the requirements that you have to fulfill before getting on your plane back. And up here is a section that other pages also have, where it lists the documents that are needed to be needed for your entry requirement into the new country. And down here, you can see that they also have an FAQ section here for any additional information, as well as additional resources here on the right. Also, if you're traveling to the United States or through the United States, you could go to the statewide regulation section. And so if you're traveling through the United States, there are several states that actually have a quarantine requirement. Most of the country is open, but I did want to show this to you in case you are traveling through any of the states. If you go down here, the color system is a little different. Red means quarantine required, which is 5 of the states, and yellow is some restrictions, and green means no restrictions. As you can see, most of the United States is in green, but there are 5 states that do require a quarantine period. And if you go down the page, you'll notice the travel restriction that each state has.
All right, tip number 3, know which COVID test you need. So there are 2 types of COVID tests. There's the PCR test and the antigen test. Depending on the location that you're going to, they might require either both of the COVID tests or just a PCR test. So knowing that beforehand is helpful. And depending on the location that you're going to, they might allow you to have your COVID test taken 48 hours before departure or up to 72 hours before departure. Tip number 4, plan for the extras. So because of the last year and a half, a lot of travel destinations did lose out on a lot of business, and I've noticed that in certain ones the prices have inflated and a lot of things are more expensive now. For example, Ubers, Airbnbs, rental cars, and attractions. Attractions have also been bumped up in price, as well as all those other things, as well as hotels. And so just having in mind that you might be having to pay more is always nice to know what size budget you need before going, so that way you don't overspend, and knowing that you might pay extra is always helpful, so that way you know to plan for more in your budget. All right. Tip number 5, know where you're getting tested. So knowing where you're getting tested is important, especially in a location outside of your home country, because looking for where you're gonna get tested might take out a chunk of your travel time, and it's more helpful to know where you're going beforehand in case the location you have chosen needs an appointment, or it needs a deposit fee beforehand, or needs any type of paperwork in order to have the appointment scheduled. So having that prepared beforehand just saves you some time and stress later. Tip number 6, print important information or have it readily accessible. What I mean by important information, I mean your vaccination card, your passport, your driver's license or your ID. And these are important because, specifically your vaccination card, this is your proof when going through borders that you have your vaccination, and it is just another mode of safety when crossing borders, so that there's no confusion and extra hassle for you. Other important information is also having your address where you're staying in the location. And if you're staying at multiple places, having those multiple addresses just written down somewhere is helpful, because when filling out customs forms, as well as the health documentations when you enter a new country, any other type of paperwork that you're given at borders might require the address of where you're staying, as well as when taking your COVID test. The clinics might also require that you know your address and have it inputted in your application. Alright, so if you're traveling through Europe, I know that entry paperwork is necessary. You also have to fill out several health certification forms before entering the country, as well as having your COVID test. So having those printed out just might make it easier when going through customs. Alright, number 7. This one's super easy. It's just bring extra face masks. I usually carry one of these with me when I travel, because even if a country might be completely open, private establishments might require that you have a face mask when entering their building. And if you're in a group, one of your group members might not have a mask, and it's inconvenient having to go get one, because most of the time the locations won't be carrying any. So if you just have a few extra, it's helpful. Personally, while I've been traveling, a few of the people that I traveled with haven't had extra masks, or they've broken theirs, because these, while I prefer them while traveling because they're just cleaner, they're faster use, they do break, and also they're not meant for using for long periods of time. So having multiple of these or reusable ones are just nice to have on hand. Tip number 8, do your research. This is probably the most important tip I have on here, because of the current situation in the world right now. Different implementations are being put out. For example, curfews. There's also changes in hours in a lot of attractions, and also a lot of different safety precautions that your home country might advise on depending on where you're traveling to. So doing some research beforehand is always helpful, so that way you're not surprised with anything, and it just allows for another level of preparedness. Tip number 9, bring a pen. Not this color, this is red, but this is the first one I saw when I was leaving my hotel. I recommend a black or blue, because there is a significantly large amount of paperwork you have to fill out when going to a different country. Not just customs forms, there's also health forms now, as well as filling out new, depending on where you're staying, there might be some extra paperwork that you have to fill out. And just having an extra pen is always helpful, so that way you're not waiting for one, or you don't have to borrow one. It just speeds things up. Alright, tip number 10, my last and final tip, is be flexible. Because of how the travel industry was shaken in the last year and a half, nothing is the way it was. There's a lot of new changes. Because of the last year and a half, there's a lot of new changes, and things are being delayed, they're changed, they're being rescheduled, and it messes with the plans that we might have for our trips. But don't let it ruin your trip. It's still nice to be able to get out. So I really do hope that you have an amazing trip. But just being a little flexible, knowing that something might not go right, and it's okay.
Okay, so this is an additional resource that I would also recommend, additionally to the kayak site. This one is just a bit more singular country focus instead of a map where you can plan your trip. So on this one, like before, I am going to actually choose the United States, and I'm just going to show you how this website works in comparison to the kayak site. So you would select the country that you're coming from, and also your passport, which is very important because different countries might have different entry requirements depending on your home country. So it's always important to know those restrictions depending on where you're coming from. So as well, I'm also going to put the United States. And the first thing that happens is it shows you all the countries that are open to you. And if there is any kind of restrictions, the thing that I also really like about this is that it kind of gives you a brief overview of the things that have to happen in order to enter. But again, going back here, it also allows you to choose your vaccination status, whether you be vaccinated, unvaccinated, and depending on where you're going. If you have a specific place in mind, for example, just for consistency, I'm going to choose the United Kingdom. All right, it shows the last time that it was updated. And also down here, it has a list of questions that would answer your entry requirement for the country. For example, do I need to go into quarantine when arriving into the United Kingdom? And it answers that depending on if you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, and also the fact that you have to fill out a passenger locator form when entering the country. So this page here just answers your entry requirements, and it lists the sources below to get more information. And again, if you change your status, it shows you the difference in quarantine periods if you're vaccinated and unvaccinated. All right, now going back to the main website, like the kayak website, the map is also separated into 3 colors. Blue for partially open, green for open, and red for closed for travel. And as you notice, because I chose my home country and my departure country, this map has changed color to mainly green and red, so it shows me that most of the countries are open for me and which countries are closed, and there's some areas that are partially closed for me. All right, so another website I highly recommend is Google Flights, and this isn't for our current status of traveling in 2021. This is just for traveling in general. I highly recommend this website, but for consistency's sake, I do want to show you how this could be useful when traveling in 2021. I chose a city in the United States as well as one in the United Kingdom. And as you can see here, this information bar here has a travel restricted notice here, and on it, it shows the entry requirement that you would need for the country. So another thing that I like about it is that if you click on more details here, it'll take you to where you could get further explanation on the entry requirements for that country. But like before, like I said with the previous 2 websites, it might not be 100% accurate. I do highly recommend that if you have any doubt, I would also check with either the airline that you're flying with or your local embassy. All right, here's a bonus tip for making it all the way to the end of the video. 24 to 48 hours before your flight, so around the same time you're checking into your flight and going over your to-do list as well as finishing up your packing, I recommend that you check the entry requirements just one more time just to make sure that you have everything in order, all your paperwork's there, and it's just another sense of security for when you go to the airport and you're prepared for your flight.
Also, if I have mentioned any websites or any information, I'll have that all linked below. I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so very much. Have a beautiful day.